Wisconsin. My children, Amanda, Rocky, and Angela Leonard, have a developmental disability called Angelman Syndrome. And since I've been posting videos on YouTube and throughout having my kids, I've been asked how they came to their diagnosis. So that is what this video is about. Um, Amanda was born in 1991. The first time we heard of Angelman syndrome was 1993. Amanda was 2. She, like a lot of parents that have young kids with Angelman syndrome, she never slept. And back then the internet isn't what it is now. So, you kind of had to search out resources. And one of the ideas that my previous husband had was it's called a Lions Club or Rotary Club, to kind of see if they knew of anybody in the area that had a child with a disability or how they solved the problem. So Rocky ended up calling the Lions Club and talking to a nice man, and he told this man about Amanda, what she was like, and the guy said, that sounds like Angelman syndrome. And Rocky said, we had never heard of that, but we were going to check into it. So he ended up having the number for the Angelman Syndrome Foundation, which at the time was in Florida. And so the next day I called the Angelman Syndrome Foundation and told them about Amanda, and they said, yeah, it sounds like she could have Angelman syndrome. We have a list of families in Michigan who are willing to talk to other families. Would you like me to send you that list? And I said yes. So when I got the list, I was looking it over, and there was a mom. She had 2 kids with Angelman syndrome, and I kind of laugh about it now because I thought to myself, if anybody knows anything about Angelman syndrome, it is this mom. So I called her, and we chatted for a long time. She had the time to chat with me for a few hours, and she ended up giving me the number and the name to the geneticist that diagnosed her children. Her children were adopted, so she adopted those children, so they were not biologically hers. So, just in case anybody's putting the time frame together of the UBE3A mutation that can be hereditary, these were adopted children, but she was still a mom and a wealth of information. So at the time, Amanda was going to a clinic in Detroit, and they had done a lot of testing. The only test that showed anything was her MRI, which showed a demyelinization. Other than that, all the genetic testing came back normal. So I made an appointment. I felt like I had to give the clinic she was seeing some loyalty and a chance. So I went back there, and I walked into the appointment all excited and thought we had answers. And I said, I think she has Angelman syndrome. And they said, no. And I said, well, have you done the test for it? And they said, no. And I said, have you ever seen anybody with it? And the doctor said, no. And I'm feeling like my feeling get very, very deflated. And I said, but there is a test you can do. Other people are diagnosed with this. And they said, yes, she doesn't have it. And I walked out of that doctor's appointment feeling like I wasn't being listened to, like they didn't take me seriously, and really just in a very different mood than I was when I walked in. I walked out crying. I was that upset that they just blew me off. So I ended up calling the number that this mother gave me and making an appointment with her doctor. This time, I took my husband with me. I told him on the way there, I said, we need to be a united front. We are taking no crap from this doctor. We are not having an experience like I had with the other clinic. So we got seen. We were in the room when the doctor walked in, and the doctor said, hey, he was very friendly. He said, hey, how are you guys doing? Tell me what's going on with your daughter. And my husband said, she has Angelman syndrome. The only thing we need you to do is run the test. And he laughed and kind of laughed at us good-naturedly, and kind of, I think he was surprised that we were so forward about that. So he said, well, I've never had a parent come in here with a correct diagnosis. I'm the doctor. Let me be the judge of that. And we said, do your thing. So he looked Amanda over, and after about a half hour, he said, I think you guys are the first parents that have ever come in with a correct diagnosis. I agree. She has Angelman syndrome. Let's do the test. That test was called the FISH test, and that test ended up coming back negative. It would be another 9 years before we had a correct diagnosis. So between the ages of 3 and 5, Amanda developmentally took off. I mean, she was able to like, um, um, she was able to do simple chores. She was able to sign a little bit. She was able to communicate non-verbally through gestures what she wanted, what she needed. We taught her to go get what she wanted. And by the time she was about 5 years old, we thought, all right, maybe we were wrong. It's possible. I mean, she was undiagnosed. So we Amanda had all the genetic testing that was available at the time to make sure that this was not something that was going to reoccur. And in my family, um, there was no history of a disability, so we had no reason to think that this would happen again. So when Amanda was 5, we got pregnant with Ange, and had Ange, and everything was going well. And when your first child has a developmental disability, if you don't have that checklist, that developmental checklist in your hand, it's in your head, and you're checking things up. Okay, there's hand-eye coordination. There's being able to put a ball in a basket. She can put the pegs in the toy that, I got her to make sure she could do that. And, a lot of these things we're checking off. Physically, Angela was not developing like she should have been. But she was very floppy. Amanda was always very rigid. She would get really rigid and throw herself back if you were holding her. And, Angela, she was just really not like that. So they say if somebody with Angelman Syndrome is going to have seizures, it's going to be onset by 3 years old. So we waited until Angela was 3.5 before we tried for our son. I did put Angela in early on so she could be around typically developing peers. There was a leading neurologist in Michigan who my kids had never seen, that in the early on program, he would come see these kids and give them a developmental workup. And so I took Angela to him one day when he was there, and I said, her sister, I think, might have Angelman Syndrome. So I wanted you to check her out because my husband and I are planning on having more kids. And he took one look at Angela and said, she does not have Angelman Syndrome. I highly doubt your other daughter does. And I said, we're undecided, but that's where we're leaning towards. And he said, where is she now? And I said, she's in school. And he said, could you bring her here today by chance? And because he was such a renowned neurologist in Michigan, I went to Amanda's school, and got her, brought her back. He looked her over and he said, okay, she might have Angelman Syndrome. Your other daughter does not. Angela was 3.5, and we tried for Rocky. When I was 5 months pregnant with Rocky, Angela went into her very first grand mal seizure, and lost a lot of her abilities. So while I was pregnant with Angela, I didn't want to get any genetic testing done. I thought being pregnant was enough, and we should wait. So we waited until after Rocky was born. Rocky was born in March of 2001. Just to kind of give you a timeline. That summer, I typed in Angelman Syndrome in my browser on the internet, and a picnic in Michigan came up, and there was a number to the mom who was holding that picnic. So I called her, got the information, got a flyer sent to me, and we went to the picnic. When we got to the picnic, her husband was there. She was not, and her kids weren't there. Well, her husband was a very nice man, came up to us, greeted us, and he looked at Angela, and he said, oh, this must be your daughter with Angelman Syndrome. And we said, no, that's our other daughter. This daughter doesn't have Angelman Syndrome. And he went, oh, okay. And I thought, all right, he was mistaken. That's totally good. Then his wife pulled up with their kids and their one daughter with Angelman Syndrome. And when I saw, what I expected to see was somebody getting out of the car that resembled Amanda. When his daughter got out of the car, she resembled Angela. I remember just staring, and I know it must have seemed rude at the time, but just staring at her. It's not what I expected. And I looked at Rocky and my husband, and he was probably having the same look I did. His mouth was kind of open, and his eyes got real wide, And we knew that we had to get testing done. So I called the number back to the mom that had 2 kids with Angelman syndrome years ago. I called that number to make an appointment. It was a new doctor. And again, I wasn't going alone. I learned my lesson the first round. Always have backup. And I don't know where my mother learned to be proactive at, but she's very good at it. My husband, Rocky, he worked full time, so he couldn't go. Um, so I called, made an appointment, took my mom with me, and we took my kids in, and the doctor took one look at my kids and said, they don't have Angelman syndrome. And I said, you don't know that. You need to do the test. I was much more adamant than I was the first time. And they said, no, we can't do it. She doesn't fit the characteristics. And I said, all right, but I'm not leaving your office, and neither are my kids, until you draw their lab work. And the lady kind of laughed and didn't believe me. And, Amanda was just really hyper, and Angela loved to tear up paper, and Rocky had a reflux, which meant any odor could set off his reflux. And he would projectile vomit. So luckily we didn't get to that point, but Amanda was like running in her office, and Angela was trying to destroy her files, and finally she said, okay, I'll do the testing, just get your kids out of my office. So they drew their lab work that day, and it got sent down to Baylor University. That was in September of 2001. Their results came in December of 2001. And they had drawn Rocky's labs when they drew the girls. If the girls' test came back positive, they were going to send Rocky's. So they sent Rocky's. Rocky ended up getting diagnosed for Angelman syndrome. On his first birthday, we got the message on our answer machine when we got home from his birthday party. So his diagnosis came in March 22nd, 2001, on his first birthday. We came in, there was a message on our machine, and it ended up being that doctor's office leaving that message on our machine. So I feel they could have picked a better day to tell us that that was a rough day. His birthday party had gone really well, but the news when we got home was not very positive. So, as you can see it, even years later, Rocky will be 18 in March, and that still has a great impact on me. Rocky's diagnosis. So, the doctor's office ended up, instead of making a follow-up appointment, ended up sending me the test results in the mail with no explanation. There was no letter stating what they said, what they meant, and it was lab results from Baylor University, so it wasn't written in layman's terms. The mom who ended up throwing the picnic, her and I became very, very good friends, still to this day. She's a wonderful friend. So anyway, I emailed her, and we didn't even really, I feel like at the time, knew each other very well, but we definitely had a connection. So I emailed her, and I'm like, this is what happened, and they sent me these test results, and I don't know how to read them. And so she said, well, send them to me. I've read my daughter's results. Maybe I can make some heads or tails of it. And she did. She explained to me kind of what the mutation looked like in words. So that I understood, but I needed to know the process. So I spent 3 months learning genetics off the internet, and I learned it to the point that I knew what questions I had to ask a doctor, but I didn't have a doctor to ask. So what I did was I ended up emailing Baylor University. Even in 2002, the Angelman syndrome was very, very small, and researchers talked to parents. I knew this. I had read it. I'd never talked to them, but I was going to give it a chance and email one of the researchers in Baylor University and ask him the questions I had. I emailed him. He answered me within a day or two, and he answered all my questions. A few weeks later, I get a call from the doctor's office who drew the lab work. This was quite a while after my kids' test results came in. And the receptionist said, your kids, their test results are in, you have them by now, we need to make a follow-up appointment. And I said, I don't really think I need one, but thank you. And she said, no, we really need to make a follow-up appointment for you guys. Is this date available? And not wanting to be rude, I said, yeah, that's good. We can make that. We ended up going to the appointment, and I thought they were just going to go over the results and explain to me what I already knew. Ends up, the geneticist sat down and had the folders in her hand and said, "So, do you have any questions?" And I said, "Nope." And she said, your 3 children have been diagnosed with Angelman Syndrome, and you don't have any questions." Not wanting to hurt her feelings, I really acted like I was trying to think of one, and I said, not that I can think of, and nope, I'm good. And she said, "Well, I got an email from Baylor University that you did have questions, and the researcher emailed me the kid's test results, your questions, and his answers to you. So that's why you don't have any questions, right?" And I said, "Right. I've already gotten them answered last year." And she said, he also sent me a message that said, "I think you need to counsel your patients better. What do you think of that?" And I looked at her and tried to be very kind and say, "I think he's correct. You need to counsel your patients better." I got up and took my kids and left. So that is pretty much, in a nutshell, the story of their diagnosis. That's how we got it, how we learned about Angelman syndrome, and how as parents, Rocky and I went from trusting doctors and thinking that they really did know it all to questioning and investigating and doing our own research, which if you're newly diagnosed, you'll learn that doctors don't know everything, but some doctors are invaluable. My kids now have a team of doctors that I don't even question what they say. So, that's how my kids got diagnosed. That's their story. Feel free to send me a message if you have any questions, if you have any comments, comment underneath this video, and have a great day.